Funky politics.
Funky politics. Funky politics.
Funky politics.
Funky politics.
I'm prolific, so gifted. I'm the type that's gon' go get it. No kidding. Breaking down a swish in front of your building. Sitting on the steps, feeling no feelings.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. I am DC, and excited. Man, we got a great show today. Sitting here, visiting with us today as a guest host, Lisa Moore, President and CEO of Girls Inc. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
Hello. I am so glad to be here.
We're so glad to have you here, okay? That person laughing in the background is Doc Ward. Doctor, what's going on, brother?
I'm glad to have Lisa here, too. You know why?
Why?
Anything to offset your presence makes the day go by so wonderfunkily.
Is that a new word, wonder?
I make up a new word every time I'm on this show. You know why?
Why?
Because the words that you hear are the words that you'll know. And without the words you know, you won't have a show. So I'm going to be on this thing until it's time to go.
You know what?
And I'm going to be here with you, too.
Well, anyway.
Say it ain't so.
Lisa, we've got a gentleman coming in, and he's going to sit down here, y'all.
Who is it?
Dr. Darron Smith.
Is he funky?
No, the guy's funky.
How funky is he?
Real funky?
How funky is he?
He stinks the place up.
He stinks the place
He stinks the place up.
He's got a story.
Okay,
He's got a story. Let me tell you something. This guy's an author. He's a university professor at the University of Memphis.
All right.
He's authored Black and Mormon, White Parents, Black Children Experiencing Transracial Adoption.
Wow.
This guy, when race, religion, and sports collide, the guy taught in Utah. I mean, the University of Utah.
And everybody knows that there's no more funkier place than Utah.
It's beautiful, but ain't but 5 black people there, including Karl Malone and his 4 children. But anyway, right here, y'all.
No, one plays in the WNBA, so that'll be 3.
I'm done.
There you go.
Stick around right here with all 3 of us and our guest, Dr. Darron Smith, on Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. We'll be right back.
Funky Politics. Riffin' on Jazz.
I'm Howard Robertson, one of your hosts for Riffin' on Jazz. Riffin' is your weekly visit with friends where we dive all in to that classic African-American art form called jazz. So don't miss Riffin' with me and my man Melvin Massey every week on your favorite broadcast and podcast platforms.
Riffin' on Jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN! Funky Politics.
Welcome back. We're right here on Funky Politics with you. We got the crew and Dr. Smith. Dr. Smith, welcome to the program. Dr. Darron Smith, how are you, sir?
Hey, it's nice to be here. Thanks for having me here.
Let's talk a little bit about your career. Number one, you're at the University of Memphis, right? Professor at the University of Memphis, but now you've done a lot of work. Man, you're probably one of the only sociology professors I know that's actually a physician assistant.
Yeah.
So you're like a step from being a doctor, Doc.
Yeah, one of the few in the country, I believe.
We'll talk. I got some medical issues later, so when it shows up, we'll talk about it. Okay?
I do charge a copay.
I'm not going to pay.
So that's
$25.
Well, you got to understand.
$25.
You got to know what the condition is.
DC's been going to the clinic for all of his services.
I ain't mad about it, Doc. Let's talk about race in America.
Okay.
Right start, man. You good?
What in particular? Which way do you want to go with this? Because we can go in any which way.
I want to take, for instance, let's go to Utah because you have a lot of experience out of the state of Utah, right?
Yeah.
University of Utah. I mean, you've done a lot of studies with black athletes there in Utah. Let's kind of unpack that thing. Where are we? We've got a president right now that's not as friendly as we would hope to be from a race relations standpoint, right?
Yeah.
And it looks like it's filtered down, not only in the South. I don't even want to talk, but you got it. Go ahead, man. You know where we're going.
Well, if you're talking about Utah in the sense that people there tend to vote for Donald Trump, is that what you're talking about?
That's where we're going, Doc.
Okay.
That's where we're going.
Yeah, so it was surprising to a lot of people, but it really wasn't surprising because, well, I don't want to make it seem like I'm off the chain, but I kind of, Mormons are really predictable. I mean, so they haven't disappointed me yet. So I think they gave Donald Trump 60% of the votes in Utah, which is a substantial amount. Sure. And what's interesting about it is that Donald Trump is he is not the pinnacle of Mormonism in the sense that he's everything that Mormonism just abhors, just absolutely has a problem with. The big issue being, y'all, this wine got me all up here floating.
That's okay. You good, Doc? This funky politics.
Rate,
See, that's what we do there, I guess. We wind them up, Doc.
Y'all spiked there. I put some little extra in there.
No, it's not. It's not. It's just grape juice. It's just funky grape juice. It's not wine.
This is a holy show now.
It's a very holy show now. Mormons may listen to this
already.
show. Yes.
All right. This is something different here.
No, before you hit Utah, I mean, I should have set this thing up.
Okay.
You actually came out of the Mormon church, right?
I did. Yes.
So you practice Mormonism.
I converted to the church when I was 15 years old, man.
Wow.
How many African American Mormons are there?
Maybe two or three.
2 or 3. Now, are you still in the church?
No,
1 or 2.
Fool with it anymore.
So that 1 or 2.
Yeah.
He's been. What do they call that when they excommunicate? He's been excommunicated.
I don't think I haven't gone. It's not happened. That hasn't happened.
Oh, I heard your name's on the list.
Well, probably so. On somebody's list, I'm sure.
Wow.
All I've done is tell the truth. Just speak the truth.
Talk a little bit about that, man. Mormonism and a brother.
It's like anything. I mean, Mormonism would be a much more sanitized version of white Christianity, white Baptist evangelical traditions. I mean, that's what you see in the Mormon church, but it's much more sanitized than
So how did you get attracted to it?
Man,
You're obviously
they knocked
not
on
white.
my door, man.
Yeah.
They knocked on my door.
Okay.
So this is the South, man. It's Bible Belt. So
so you were brought
I was
into
recruited
Mormonism
in Nashville.
the South.
Yeah.
Oh, not in Utah.
No,
this guy comes out of Nashville, man.
No,
Okay.
this happens. This is later in my life.
Only in
this
Nashville.
particular part. But
Okay.
Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I thought it was Jehovah's Witnesses. They always.
You
they
thought it was
always
wrong
lurking,
thing, and then you
they always
realized
lurking.
got
that
to the
I was
program,
equipped for.
Got to the conversion program.
ready
Don't
for
knock
the
the witnesses.
Mormons.
Don't knock the witnesses.
Oh, wow. This isn't Jehovah's
Shoot,
Witnesses.
man.
This is Latter-day
I
Saints.
was like, y'all must be Jehovah's because they come around here an awful lot.
Right.
Wow.
No, but it was 2 white dudes, man, and
On the bicycle?
Yeah, no, they weren't. I think they were driving.
Okay.
They parked somewhere. I believe they walked around the neighborhood, and they do what Mormon missionaries generally do, which is attract out people, proselytize folks.
Right.
So they happened to, knock on my door.
And you answered it.
I did when I was 15, but it took me a minute though because I was standing
you were 15.
there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was buck naked, and the shower was going, the music was loud. I was
This is getting weirder by the day.
I was like, man, this is a bad time.
Not
boy.
when you answered the door, though.
I was literally standing behind the door, buck naked, man.
Wow.
Water all over because I was taking a shower at the time they knocked on
That
the
sounds
door.
very biblical.
It was. Yeah, it was. You know what I'm saying?
It does.
was like divine.
I mean,
it was divine.
right?
Black
You're
man.
like-
It was
Hold on.
divinity.
Ain't
Divinity
exactly
is what it
road
was.
to
But what
Damascus
did they
moment.
say that
They said to me,
I
bro,
want to know more?
They said to me, they said, listen, my name is Elder so and so. The Mormon missionaries call themselves elders.
Right.
So I'm Elder so and so and Elder the other so and so, and we're here to share a message with you about the Lord Jesus Christ. Wow. Do you have time in your evening to allow us to come in and share this? Share it with you. And I was like, that's the first thing I said. I was like. I don't want to say on the air.
So you're getting there right now. That's why we're on funky politics right now. Go ahead, Doc. It's funky. Tell it like it is now.
But anyway, I just don't want to be rude. So I got my clothes on, let them in, and they started talking about living prophets and continuing revelation. Right, the idea that the heavens aren't closed, but the heavens remain open.
Okay,
and as you know, you may not know, but in evangelical faith traditions, right, there's the notion that the heavens are closed. Right, we have all that we need in the Bible. The Bible is inerrant, etc. Right.
Oh wow.
So Mormons come along and says, no, the Bible isn't inerrant, and the heavens are still open, and the Lord still reveals things to His children. Right.
Right.
So who is this person who He reveals truth unto? Right, and it's the Mormon prophet. Right. Joseph Smith. It started with Joseph Smith. Then it transitioned down all the way to the current cat who's in there right now.
Right.
And so, so that was the kind of backstory when they came and knocked on my door. I remember I was 15, man.
Right.
What I don't know anything.
Do they sprinkle or do they dip? I mean,
they dip.
Oh, they dip.
They dip.
Yeah.
Wow, didn't know that.
It's a boom.
It's Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
Remember,
so
Jesus Christ was
baptism by
baptized.
immersion.
He was baptized.
I'm
So
CME.
anyone that
We
would follow-
sprinkle.
Right.
What?
I'm CME. We sprinkle.
CME.
Yeah.
Christmas,
That's
Mother's Day, and Easter.
Lord have mercy. I knew he was going there. Doc, did you know he was going there?
Sprinkle, man. Hey, listen, here's the thing.
Nobody sprinkles but E40, man.
I mean,
Get out of here.
a lot of folks, in defense of Mormonism, I will say this.
Yes.
A lot of folks believe that Mormonism is not a Christian religion.
Oh wow.
Okay, and that's fundamentally
A lot of
wrong.
evangelicals, and I've seen
Yes.
polls that say evangelicals don't believe.
How could it be? How could it be a non-Christian religion? It's the
Well,
Church of Jesus
right,
Christ.
Exactly.
The
Christ is the
Latter-day
center
Saints,
of the center of the Mormon
Right,
faith,
right,
and so
right.
they teach all things Christ, believe all things Christ. They actually use the same Bible as most evangelical traditions.
So you're not a Mormon now.
No, I don't practice.
What
anymore.
took you out of the faith?
Well, I think just the life of the mind, I think, took me out.
What does that mean?
Just the scholarly efforts and
As
studying.
you learned more,
As I learned more
about your religion,
read more, studied more.
you
asked more
accepted less about your
questions.
religion. Okay,
I accepted less,
Right.
and to the point to where I just said adios.
wow,
So I can't do it.
wow.
I can't, hold on. I can't live my truth.
I understand.
I can't do that.
So coming from that perspective, because that is a deep evangelical perspective, as an African American man, you probably are, from an African American man's standpoint, better suited to discuss the spectrum of race relations that we have here in America, because you've been on the, I guess I would probably say the whitest side of the white. You've been with the religious right, far religious
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely.
So looking at that and I don't say that in any type of disparaging way about that sector. Having been on that side of the fence, where do you see race relations as we are situated today?
That's a huge question.
It's a funky question. We ask funky questions on Funky Politics.
We can go we can go several different directions with that one. I mean, it depends on which particular institution you're trying to define. What are you looking at? You're looking at education? Are you looking at healthcare? You're looking at
I'm looking at the general way that we respect and live, and how do you see us working together or not from a racial perspective, given the leadership that we have right now and what's being produced from that aspect? How do we get along? How do we manage to or not get along in a different cultures and races? We're heading toward a lot of, if you want me to editorialize, I don't think my co-hosts do, but we've got a lot of tribalism going on in America today.
Yeah.
We didn't have that same tribalism 2-3 years ago. If we did, it was not as pronounced. So where are we today with that, and how do we get to this point? How do we get over?
Well, I would start by saying this: the U.S. is fundamentally racist, just from the core.
That's
it
the
always
kind of
has
answer I
been.
want. If you believe
it's a foundational, institutionalized system that's been put in place since the 1600s. It's been around here forever. In saying that, race is a salient factor in the U.S., so people think and consider race. Whether they express it or not is another story, but it's always in the back. It's always in the backdrop. It may not be in the forefront of our consciousness, but it's always, or it certainly informs our unconscious mind, which hence informs our conscious decisions and thoughts and actions. I think that the current administration has emboldened already existing factions of haters that have been out there for a minute. It was funny you mentioned that. Now, when I say haters, I'm speaking in particular to these folks who go by the Donald Trump supporters. These folks,
the diehards.
Yeah, the Tea Party folks, the Donald Trump folks, the folks who were still upset about the McGovern election in the 60s. We're talking about this group of people. We're going,
I don't even think I was born then.
Well, I'm saying this is a.
I think you were.
And you hear that
faction
and you're hearing this on Funky Politics. No, go ahead, Doc.
Well, this is a faction of very entitled white folks who feel like they need and deserve and are the masters of the universe. I was talking about this the other day to one of my friends. We're talking about, this particular group of white people is around 36% who continue to support President Trump, given all his shenanigans and all his foolery and so on. Who are these people? These are the Tea Party folks. These are the Reagan folks. This is the same group of people these are the slave masters. These are the slave patrollers. These people, what I'm talking about.
Wow.
These are these are Scots-Irish people. These are the Scots-Irish.
Whoa.
I mean, this is who these people are.
I'm looking at Lisa like she like,
and the Scots-Irish have always been, they've been known, historically, they've been known to be much more brutish, much more, much more difficult to reason with. Scots-Irish, descendants of Scots-Irish. So this, I think that these people that we're seeing and the uptick in, I think what you're talking about, Marcus, is the uptick in, one thing at least anyway, is the uptick in violence we've seen since Trump has been in office. But remember, this started during the Obama era. Yeah. So as soon as Obama got elected, we started to see a precipitous uptick in extremist activity. And it went through the roof with Trump because Trump sort of spoke the language of extremism.
Fueled the fire.
He did.
Well,
so.
How do you, if for some reason we were able to get past that was a wrong phrasing. We haven't gotten past anything.
That's right.
Because I absolutely agree with you that this is just the DNA of this country. It's a racist country. It was built on racist principles. I was asked in an interview, job interview, if I was racist, which was a really interesting question, probably illegal. And my response was, yes, I'm a white woman in America. And any white person, especially a white woman in America that says otherwise is lying.
Lisa, you're white.
Yes, I know. It's shocking, but true. And
That's
so
fine for me.
For me, the differentiator is acknowledge the systemic DNA, but then how does one then behave? So the question is, if we are inherently built on this structure, A, how does one dismantle it? Or does one override it? Because apparently for a minute we were somewhat overriding, but then it got blown back open. How do we kind of put it back in the box?
Well, to get it back to a state of somewhat normalized stasis, before Trump, before Obama, is to go back to the way it was before. Go back to the traditional ways in which.
Well, that wasn't working particularly well either.
Well, I'm saying this is this is a lipstick on a pig moment right here.
Yeah.
And in terms of social change, I don't think we can even have that question, even have that conversation yet, simply because we haven't. When we go from, it's like going from A to C without doing the B. The A and the B is the work of justice, right? And so, in order to get to the work of justice, we have to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Yes, I agree.
We have to have a reckoning of our past.
Mm-hmm.
We have to sit down and say, this is what we did. This is the lives that it's cost. This is the harm, the great harm it's done, intergenerational harm that it's done, and we have to come to consensus there. And some of the remedies that may flow from that might be things like, and this might sound radical to some of your listeners, but it's not radical to me at all, and it doesn't seem like it is to this growing generation of Americans who seem much more moderate and much more dissident than the two previous generations. Is the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the need to amend the Constitution. The Constitution as it exists just doesn't speak to everybody's interest. It spoke then to propertied white male elites.
Doc,
right?
I'm going to stop you right there because now you're attacking the Constitution. And we don't want it. No, just look, we're going to put a pin right there. We're going to come back and we're going to pick back up Truth and Reconciliation. I like that. Intergenerational. And then we talk about radical listeners. We've got some radical listeners out there that believe that there's a different way. And I'm not so sure we've addressed that yet, right? So we'll be right back with Dr. Darron Smith right here on Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Keeping it real, right, and funky.
I think one of the things that makes a difference is having an African-American man who leads as the executive editor. I'm always about this girl power. One of the other things we've been talking about is youth and their interaction with the justice system.
Funky Politics on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN 3.
Am I going to sit there and argue with you over we had steak 2 days ago, I want chicken?
B.
I'm going to be spicy all the time. I don't care if I'm single or not.
C.
I think that the foundation is how you were brought up.
3 Black Chicks on the KUDZUKIAN Network. KUDZUKIAN Funky Politics.
Here we go, yo. Here we go, yo. So what's the scenario? Here we go, yo. Here we go, yo. So what's the scenario?
We're back with Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. I'm sitting here with the crew, and we've got Dr. Darron Smith of the University of Memphis. And, man, we were just talking about this Truth and Reconciliation piece. And, Lisa, I'm going to toss it to you because I know you had a piece that you want to throw in there.
Yeah. I was sharing that I had an opportunity to go to South Africa, and there was a lot of talk, and it was soon after the end of apartheid, around the power of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And it's such a model of healing that we need to do that as a country, because we have, to your point, we have never looked back and healed the wounds that has perpetuated the system that we're living in and fighting in currently. I'm curious to you. We had a protest on that shut down the I-40 bridge, and it was calmed. And there was an agreement that there would be a community engagement where the mayor and the interim police chief and others were there to hear from the community members. And it went pretty badly because there were so many people there that were really hurting, that really wanted to be heard, that were not heard. It was clear there wasn't really a lot of listening going on. And it sparked the thought in me that how powerful some real truth and reconciliation neighborhood-based opportunities would be.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious to hear from you through your research and the work that you've done. What would that look like in America for us to have a truth and reconciliation? Does it just need to be a grassroots thing for us to have it work? Is this a governmental thing? How do you see that playing out?
Well, it would have to be led by the government. I mean, the government is the main entity, the main beneficiary of slavery and genocide and so on. It was slave labor that built up the coffers of the United States, that gave us the wealth that we have, that fueled the Industrial Revolution, which in turn fueled other revolutions that have occurred, even including the technological, the tech revolution that took place in the 2000s or 80s, whatever it was. Sure. So
slave labor.
Yeah.
How do you trace slave labor to Apple?
To who?
To Apple.
Well, I think it's the wealth generating opportunities that were made as a result of slavery, right? That made that created opportunities for folks like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates to have access to newly emerging markets, such as monies into technology that they didn't otherwise have access to before. Right,
just ain't trickling down from generation.
Right, money begets money begets money begets money. Okay. So somewhere, somehow, somebody's ancestors benefited somehow, some way from slavery, and was able to build up intergenerational wealth to pass down to family members. That's generally how whites.
And just to be clear, we talk about it. I mean, it comes from the fact that you had hundreds of thousands of people working in America for no wages,
right,
producing things that were producing profit,
right,
that were going all to.
Right.
Those who were owning slaves.
Right.
And none to those who were working.
Right.
So we just don't sound like we're just blaming it on the white man.
Right.
We're talking about it from an economic standpoint.
Sure. In which the beneficiaries were propertied elite white males.
Right. Sure.
That came from England.
For whom the Constitution was written.
Absolutely.
By whom the Constitution was written.
It's hard to fathom that in this current political climate that there's a will to address the historic ills in this country.
Oh, no. I mean, I think what you've seen is really a deeper division and a deeper polarization. It's always been there, but it just takes a little bit to stoke it. Mm-hmm. And one of the ways to do it is to throw race on it, throw race on the situation. It just fuels it, makes it even more combustible. Because we've yet to deal with the elephant in the room. And I don't think this particular administration is interested in dealing with the elephant in the room.
Which is what?
Race. Inequality, social inequality, economic inequality, inequality of humanity, inequality of the soul, existential inequality.
Well, now there's going to be inequality. There's going to be inequality anyway, because two people are never going to be on the same playing field when it comes to certain things. I think that's the first thing. So, and I'm not saying this, and I'm not saying any, I'm going to say it. So how do we make the argument about cultural division and the equality that it should exist from a cultural perspective and from a religious perspective and from a gender perspective? How do we make that argument in today's world against the backdrop of what we have now?
People have to be given the opportunity to have access to the things that will improve their lives. If they never knew those things existed, or never had access to them to begin with, then they're behind the curveball.
So it starts with access.
It starts with access. It starts with having an education system that's about justice, right? That you mentioned how do we bring a truth and reconciliation style commission to the United States? It would have to be led by the federal government. It would start with an apology. It would start with a national discussion on the pain and suffering of groups. Just exactly how South Africa and Germany have done this, and other countries have done it as well. I'm looking at giving people voice, giving voice to the voiceless, giving voice and giving humanity to people suffering.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. Does this include reparations?
Yes, it would include a very generous reparations package for folks whose descendants can be traced back to slavery, the transatlantic slave trade here in the United States. Part of that would be free education. Part of that would look like no taxes for the next 10, 20 years for your for your family, family's family. Yeah, why not?
So not necessarily a check, but there can be, let's just say, some type of credit, right?
No kind of money exchange. If people don't, I mean, you can make it. You can still make this thing.
You can make it right.
Yeah, you can. But it would start with that. It would have to be really a cosmological, moral kind of a revolution. Something that's different than what
you said. Cosmological.
Yeah,
I like that term, man.
Yeah,
we say a lot of terms.
Speaking of the stars,
I ain't heard of cosmological, but now that's almost like funknominal.
No, that's beyond funknominal.
That's different.
Yeah, because I mean, cosmological's outside of what.
So let's just say
that's
that
precisely what it is, Marcus. It's something. It's something that's outside of our. What we would normally do as humans. See, I think we fail to realize that at the end of the day, we're all the same species. The differences that we see between each other are less than 1%, and we fetishize over just those little small differences in skin tone, eye shape, hair texture, and so on.
Even in our own culture, right?
Oh yeah,
even in our own culture.
Well, but our own culture learned it from Europeans, right? Wow. So folks who are denigrating each other on the basis of race, they're all sort of enacting what they've been taught from European cultures.
Where's the hope?
Yeah, no, sounds bad.
In the new generation. Yeah. In the newer generation.
What are you seeing that you think is going to be a tide changer?
Rebellion. Rebellion. I'm seeing a lot of rebellion. A lot of.
So you got to see a lot more I-40 bridges?
Perhaps. Yeah, as the United States continues and the world continues to separate into have and have-nots, which is on a steady course to doing that. We're going to see a lot more suffering, and when people start to suffering, then that's when they start taking to the streets, and that's when you start seeing all these, some chaos, some public outcry, and so on and so forth. It's almost dystopian, but it's true.
Yeah, I was speaking with a friend recently who's from Venezuela. And we were having a political conversation that he was a part of about the division here in the United States and how it's just getting greater and greater. And his word of caution was, don't let that divide get greater, because that's what happened to Venezuela, and it killed the country. It's killing the country. His family is starving. And it all was rooted in an intentional division of at the political level. So what are your thoughts about, this notion that we don't want to be another Venezuela, or do we need to be another Venezuela so that we can rebuild?
Wow.
I don't ever see the American empire going out like that. It's a nice thought, but I would never see that happening, because the state power is too great, federal power is too great. It would be crushed in a matter of, it wouldn't last very long. So I don't see that. So the only way to change it here would be the power of the mind, the power of the pen, the power of morality. You mentioned the hope. The hope lies there, outside of our existence. It's an existential kind of a thing. It's what King was tapping into, right? The whole notion of King's movement in part was a moral movement, right? Trying to get people to realize the humanity and what it means to be human, right?
But that was the first step.
Yeah.
And how do we? Yeah, then that's the ultimate question: is how do you build people's humanity?
But that was the first step, and I'll go back there, because that first step was him getting people to realize that the practice that we were engaging in of social separation based on race was wrong. It was immoral. It wasn't part of any fabric of any religion or anything that you practice and hold true. And once you bought into that, the next push was to try to make those laws that kept segregation alive obsolete and move.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
And now, moving from that, the next step was now to provide economic equality.
Right.
And upon that step, Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Right. When it got to money, that was it.
So I would say, put a pin in that, we're still at economic inequality. And that's where we left off. And that's where we've got to pick up. And I believe everything that you're saying, but a lot of the words you're using, cosmological, existential, are things that are just not within the realm of what we realm of where we are right now,
Sure.
intellectually.
Sure.
How do we speed that up? How do we get to the point where we are now?
It's leadership. It's the type of people we vote for. I mean, in this country, it's a two-party system. That's just the way it's done. It's done through a so-called democratic process.
Maybe we need to move that.
Yeah. I mean, other countries have a parliamentary system, right?
Yeah.
Theirs are very different than ours.
Right.
So everybody has a voice.
Right.
Here you got two people that have a voice. And we know, let's just be straight up, one particular party doesn't give a rat's ass about whether or not anybody other than elite white men have access to anything.
Sure.
That's wealth and access to wealth and wealth generating opportunities. That includes working class whites. That's why you're seeing them drop off like flies in terms of the death suicide rate in this country.
Wow.
I don't mean that disparagingly, but it's true. White folks are dropping off because they're suffering too, and their hatred for the other and for minoritized peoples and immigrants is causing them to have literally die by gun, die by suicide, domestic partner violence, gun accidents, accidental shootings, just all kind of stuff.
But from a psychosocial standpoint, how is it that if you are marginalized and you are white, you can't see that above you is not a black man, but it's a white man or a system that's not built for you. And you're sitting here next to the same guy who's fighting the same struggle. Why don't they see that and say, look, you know what? Maybe our partnership, maybe our fight is not against the black race, but it's against the class race. And I tell people all the time, I think it's an economic thing like we talked about before. It's an economic thing. Now, do we still have race in America? Yeah, sure we do. We've got issues in America. But we are divided even in our own culture from a monetary standpoint, right? I like to live in a certain community, and if I see people moving in my community that may have cars in their yard, but they look like me, I'm going to move or some stupid mess like that, right? Rather than talking to your brother or your sister. But it's to me, it's a class-based thing now. It's so much more based on class. How do we get there? Well,
I don't think you can talk about class in America without talking about race.
Right. Okay.
Both race and class are really two sides of the same coin. You can learn a lot about, because most people who are poor are people of color, right? So you can't really separate out that. And also a large cohort of white people are poor in this country too. Right. And you're seeing a lot. And so the backlash to that would be, some of the suicide deaths that we're seeing in this country. There's a new book that's out. I'm gonna plug this brother's book. It's called Dying of Whiteness. It's written by Jonathan Metzl.
Wow.
You ever heard of Jonathan Metzl? He's a professor at Vanderbilt. He's in the Department of Psychiatry, and he does sociology too. So he goes around and interviews all these working class white folks who voted for Trump to find out what up, particularly with the gun stuff, right? Yeah. And he interviewed this one dude named Adam. And essentially, I'm going to paraphrase. He asked Adam the question, why are you so opposed to Medicaid, Obamacare? And I'd rather die than have any government help whatsoever. He says, you'd rather die. I'd rather die. He was serious about his death. And then have government help or allow, blacks and everybody else to have access to that, which really in reality, 40% of welfare is white folks.
Yes.
They use up the majority of the resources of welfare.
That's right.
Don't get it twisted.
Right.
But so part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission would be telling the truth, right, about what really is. And the question you ask about why these people don't see this stuff, it's either feigned ignorance, right, just complete, I see it, I know it's happening, but refuse to acknowledge it. Yeah. Just don't want to believe it. Right. And I think part of that is true from a psychosocial standpoint. Yeah. Because if white folks have to admit that what they've been taught is utter,
it's a lie.
Ooh, I could weigh in on that after the break.
Then the dominoes, the house of cards just falls down. Wow. Everything just doesn't, just goes to hell.
Doc, hold that point right there. Look. It's getting hot here on Funky Politics. It's getting stanky. I don't know if that's me or you, Doc. But anyway.
No, it's you. It's tight clothes.
It is not me.
Whatever. Yeah. We'll be right back here on Funky Politics with Dr. Darron Smith. We're going to talk about some of these books you've written, man. I mean, you have done a lot of work. Transracial adoption. You've talked about race and politics and sports. We're going to talk about it, all right? We'll be right back here on Funky Politics on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
Later, alligator. Funky Politics on the KUDZUKIAN Network. Keeping it real, right, and funky.
Is this an opportunity that we can seize and express interest from the governor and the state to act on the behalf of young people in Shelby County? There are stories that we don't want to tell because they will piss some folks off, make some folk mad.
Funky Politics on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN!
We got the funk. Funky Politics on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
We're back. Funky Politics powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. The crew, DC, Doc Ward, and Lisa Moore. I like the way that works. DC, Doc Ward, and Lisa Moore. That kind of rhymes a little bit. Doc, what do you think?
I'm surprised that you've been able to keep energy this long.
Whatever.
I can't stand
this guy.
That's the thing that
Dr.
that
Darron
impresses
Smith,
me.
University professor at the University of Memphis. This brother's a known author, a speaker on circuit on the speaking circuit out there. Man, let's talk something about what you have done. All of this work that you've written, that you've gotten down to paper, transracial adoption. Doc, you just spoke to me.
Well, the conversation is about race relations. I think the whole conversation we've been having today is about race relations, not just about the existence of race. We know we're different races, different cultures, but how we coexist.
Sure.
And how we coexist successfully. And one of the areas you've talked about it, you've written about it in so many different areas, from sports to religion to even something as prominent now as cross-cultural adoptions. Yeah. And to that piece, because that's something that's interesting. We really haven't talked about that much on Funky Politics. What was your research there when you were looking at cross-cultural adoptions? What is the essence of what you were finding out?
That's a good story, man. I appreciate the question. Yeah. In Utah, teaching there at a little stall. Yeah, I was about 20 years in Utah, man. Mm-hmm. I was teaching there, and I would have these young black students come to my class. And when we got to the issue of race and the issue of the church, the Mormon church, and this history of discrimination against black people, these black students would always sound like white students. They would always defend the church and always. Right. I would be like, what? So, and I was like, what's up with that? So it happened one time, and I was like, okay, that's a fluke. Then it happened again, and I was like, okay, this is not a fluke. This is something. Then it happened a third time. And I was like, okay, this is something. So I asked the young lady that I said, where are you from? I just said, just curious, where are you from? She was from some little small town up in Idaho somewhere.
Wow.
And she was adopted by a white family. I was like, oh, okay. This is what's going on. They look like me but act like y'all a moment. No, this is what this is.
Wow. So is it live or is it memory?
So, and it was a lot of young people like that, man. And so I started, that's what got me interested in transracial adoption. I wanted to find out more about identity development. What makes us black?
And what is transracial adoption?
White. What makes them Latino?
What is that? What is transracial adoption?
It's cross-cultural adoption. It's the most prevalent kind is white black adoptions.
Black adoptions.
Right.
Okay.
So
white parents, black children, or vice versa.
White parents, black children.
So there are not that many black parents adopting white children.
Very rare. Very rare.
Wow.
Well, the system ain't gonna let that happen.
Oh, well, it'll let it happen. But are black people adopting kids that much? Period.
They are, but usually it's informally. So
like we always did.
My cousins,
grandmama taking care of my grandma's raising
us. Like my sister, that's actually my cousin that was raised in the same house as me because her mom may not have been able or fit or may have been too young to raise it. What we've been doing for years.
We just don't get the credit for that in terms of the numbers, right?
The tax credit?
No, I'm talking about no, hold on. The legal ramifications that say that you've been legally adopted.
Right.
Like my sister takes care of my great niece, right?
Can't put you on health care.
But she's got my niece, who just kind of gave my great niece to my sister, and she does take care of her, and has for the last 15 years.
But talk about that from the perspective of white parents adopting black children.
Yes.
Well, what were the key findings? You said you were fascinated with what makes you black, what makes you Latino, what makes you. What'd you find out?
Well, I just found out that black children who are raised with white families come out like white people. I mean, they're white people in brown bodies, essentially. So they have all the white sensibilities that the white parents have, all the experiences and upbringings that their white parents have, right? So for all intents and purposes, they white.
Is that a good thing or a bad?
White.
But is that a good
terrible.
thing or a bad thing?
It's bad for their health.
Okay, bad for their health.
Bad
like
for their
how?
health.
Sure it is.
Bad for their health. Like how?
Because humans have the uncanny ability to police one another.
Yes.
We just can't help it.
Yes.
You know, and we're policing each other because it's an evolutionary thing. You all were talking about it earlier.
Right.
You're talking about divisions and stuff like that not being natural.
Sure.
And it's not natural because as our ancestors have proven, we needed each other to survive. And so we did, however, latch on to subtle differences in temperament and attitudes and all that, but nothing. Race was something that was introduced into the American experience. You're
listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network. Doc?
So that's not natural. That's not natural. But the interesting thing about transracial adoption that I found, man, is that I found two types of parents. One parent that raises their children to be colorblind, right? And the other,
they poke their eyes out.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the only colorblind. That's the only way to colorblind I know.
I tell them colorblind, and then the other one is color conscious. I saw a lot less color conscious and much more colorblind in my research.
So for a white parent adopting black children, can we find it safe to say that it is of paramount importance that a white parent expose that black child to the acquaintances of African American or black people?
I would say it would be imperative for those white parents to be exposed to black people and their experiences before they adopt black children.
Right.
Okay. So then they need to actually take on the process of being an African American or simulating African American life for themselves, so that they can effectively teach it to their children and not just take them out exposed.
One of the ways you talked about reducing discrimination, reducing racism in America, is by white folks tend to do very well when they have folks who are equal status to them.
Yeah.
In class, education, income. When white folks have people of color who have equal status, it tends to reduce racism, right? So, but generally, it's not that way. It's generally whites who are superordinate over people of color, right? They have authority and leadership over people of color, and they're not equal status.
Right.
So that's generally one way in which racism and discrimination is perpetuated, is that you have a lot of white managers and folks who are in leadership who are making decisions about who to hire, and they are relying on unconscious scripts that are speaking them even as they speak to the candidate right in front.
Well, Lisa, you've got a situation, or your family makeup. I don't want to call it a situation.
My children are not a situation.
No. But I want you to jump in here but check this out. You have
situation one.
Situation the wrong word. But no, hold.
Situation number 9.
Lisa, you don't have the adoption piece, but you've had to migrate this entire system too, right?
Well, it's different.
Yeah.
And
you already in the environment, first of all.
Well, I mean,
let her tell her story. Thank you, Doc.
I mean, I am a native Memphian.
Sure.
I grew up in Memphis, and I grew up in diverse settings.
Sure.
And made the choice to marry an African American man who I'd grown up with. Wow. I mean, if you looked at our family profile side by side, our fathers were both attorneys. Our mothers were both master's degree professionals. His oldest sibling and my oldest sibling are born a week apart.
So what Doc is actually saying is true. You're proving his point right now. You know that, right?
And maybe I'm just saying
commonalities, right?
And so
you're proving
yes,
his point.
absolutely. We went to the same elementary school, junior high school.
Wow.
And got married and had children. And so there is an interesting element to having biracial children.
Sure. Right.
And I wouldn't say that I'm like the benchmark for anything, but most people say, "Oh, are all white women in Memphis like you?" No.
No, you off the chain.
No. Yours, but see, it seems to me that your situation was seamless.
Hey, leave that situation.
No,
take the word out.
Right. My life was an life experience. To your point, my life experience was integrated. However, there were some examples of the typical racial dynamic that wasn't. I don't even know how to describe it, but I mean,
what
we
it is.
had
It's
there was
politics.
an African American woman that cleaned our house.
Yeah.
That's a weird dynamic. But her daughter, her daughter would come. We'd play all day. It didn't seem like a separate thing to me.
Right.
I got you.
My schools were integrated, and my best friends were of all hues. So it was a natural state of being to me. Like, it was a natural state of being. And my father,
Memphis, right? But
yes,
but you're young too, though. I mean, you're only about 25, so
that's true.
We're not talking about the.
But it was
50s
seamless.
or
Like I
60s.
tried. Like I dated a Caucasian girl when I was growing up, and I went to her house, and then her mom's at the door, and I was expecting her to be there. That's a totally different thing. We wasn't all that sunshine and peppermints. It was like,
no, I agree,
dude. What you doing up in my front door?
So my family was my family was not like that, right? So I had the benefit to make your point.
Yeah.
I had the benefit. I'm not assimilating to anything.
Sure.
No one was having to assimilating to anything.
It was seamless.
It was a seamless integration of an equitable lifestyle that just was normal to me. It was a normalization, and at the same time, my parents, when we announced we were getting married, were like, what took you so long?
Right.
We knew it anyway, right?
Right.
Instead of like, we ain't coming.
No, there was not that. And yet there was are you sure you're ready?
Right.
Like there was an awareness of you're going to face some stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Are you ready?
Because this is the South.
Because it's the U.S. I'm not blaming the South. This is the U.S. The most racist place I've lived was Boston, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I
For real.
I can understand that.
And so for my children, they had the balance of
both cultures
of their cultures and who they are. And my daughter is getting her graduate degree in human rights in the Netherlands.
Oh wow!
So she has been very clear from the very beginning.
Basically. Yeah.
She's been very clear from the beginning. I'm not white. I'm not black. I'm me. I am a combination.
Wow.
So don't put me in any one box.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I'm going to have and that's why she's a worldly person.
She's got the best of both worlds, then, right?
She does have the best of both worlds. She has the best of all worlds.
Yeah.
Like, let's just, and it's not colorblindness. That's crap.
Yeah.
It's let me be my own identity and who I am as a human being, and let's focus on that.
But didn't have a state of mind, though.
Well, it's absolutely a state of mind.
Yeah.
I mean, when she was in elementary school, she was called an Oreo, and she was like, "That's so sweet. I love cookies." And her friends were like, "No, girl, that's not what that means." So she's had these awarenesses, but she has to be who she is.
Let me jump to Utah, Doc. You've done a lot of work, and you've talked a lot about in your book about how race, religion, and sports collide. We've got a lot of athletes who find themselves in a lot of these Boston, right? Houston. I mean, a lot of areas. Utah.
Yeah, but they got millions of dollars though.
Yeah, but it does not make them. It doesn't
Happy?
shield them off though, does it? From those issues,
having money in those
because you have money
settings.
doesn't necessarily shield them off from what they'll face or their children will face in these communities of that are super majority, right?
Right.
Talk a little bit about that Utah experience that you had when you were there.
Isolation, very isolated, very authoritarian. The state is, the church really has a long reach on the members because they're everywhere, especially in Utah County, which is 97% conservative, GOP supporting.
Right. Wow.
And that's where the majority of there's Mormons, members of the LDS faith, all over the state of Utah, but the concentration bulk of them are in Utah County. And so being a person of color there is different than being a person of color here. Here, white folks and black folks here have long divisions, and you can see it. It's clear. There, it's a much more of a naivete there, much more of like an exotic, wow. I was blown away when I first went. People never seen black folks out there, and when they see black people, they assume that you are either an athlete, all that stuff you heard is true.
Athlete or rapper,
or some because you have no business.
Engineer or
you have
you're
no
a doctor.
business being here other than those reasons why. And so athletes, I think, have a lot. They pay a heavy price.
Karl Malone
for that. Well, he was an exception.
Tell me why.
He was an exceptional Negro. I think he embraced the culture. He wasn't. He didn't convert to the Mormon church, but embraced it in terms of the hunting, fishing,
Well, it's a far
outdoors.
stretch for him to do because he was from Louisiana. You know what I mean?
That's not a big
Sportsman's
stretch.
paradise. He's just going to a different place.
Right.
It's just colder. That's it.
But he was accepted though, right?
Yeah.
Because he did what they did, though.
Yeah, he fished and hunted, and folks, so folks could see him as they could identify with him.
Sure.
You know,
and I don't want to point him out, but you had an Adrian.
But
wasn't Adrian Dantley out there at one point?
It was long. Yeah,
it was a long time
ago.
ago.
A minute ago. Yeah.
So how do you juxtapose that? I mean, these guys were there in the 75, 76 in the Provos and the Salt Lake Cities way back when, before we had all this new technology. Now you got guys there now. How are they migrating between? I'm trying to maintain my blackness. I want hot wings, or I want this, or I want to go kick it. And you got a city like Provo. You got a city like Salt Lake City.
I don't think I think Provo. They have a Polynesian coach down there now.
Oh,
yeah, he's been there a couple years now. So that's a good thing actually, because a lot of the Polynesian culture, the Mormon Church recruits heavily, and most of them are members of the Mormon faith.
But that's Brigham Young, right?
Pardon me?
Brigham Young. When you saying Provo, but didn't they just have a situation where one of the players hugged or kissed or something, or maybe even had sex with somebody? He's going to be suspended because
it was Brandon Davis, wasn't it?
Wasn't
that was a couple of years ago.
I don't know if it was a black player or a white player.
No, it was.
But it was. I remember there was a situation.
Yeah, that was 2011 when that happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So they still have that same real strict morality situation.
Yeah, and I think that's a recipe for disaster too, because when they recruit in, young men of color, particularly from Compton and places like that, they're already experienced in things.
Right.
And then you ask them to suddenly stop, to go cold turkey.
Well,
to
that's
go
unnatural.
Cold turkey.
I can't stop that, Doc. It's hard.
Here's what the most incredibly stupid thing that they ever do is that when they were doing the recruiting trips, they take them to parties and stuff. That even happens at BYU.
Right.
And so, things happen at the parties.
Right. Like every recruiting trip,
absolutely,
all over the country.
They get there, they think this is the way it's going to be, right? Oh, yeah. They get here, and all of a sudden they crack down on all that stuff. And so the young men end up getting, the okie dokie.
Yeah, but you can't okie dokie by yourself. I mean, that's what always gets me. You can't do that.
I've okie dokie by myself.
See, the problem is this: is that when these young men get to show up on campus, they are, like any other athlete. They're like, wow.
And now we're talking about anywhere, really, like not just Utah.
Right. It's not just Utah.
Right.
Wisconsin,
Utah.
Arizona.
But I think what's interesting about Utah is just the sheer isolation of it. Like you just see a black person, you just know it's an athlete.
Right.
And even though it may not be, you just know it's an athlete because it's just so few black people there. It's just so few. So the ones that they bring in, the folks they bring in from other places have a rougher time than those that are. Now you're seeing second generation Mormons who are growing up, who are athletes now. Like what's the brother's name who plays for the Patriots?
Oh wow,
what's his name? He's a linebacker. Oh God,
I hate the Patriots. I can't tell you his name.
And we're not going to tell.
Let's just call him. Let's call him Bill Belichick.
We're not going to pump him up.
Yeah,
Bill Belichick Jr.
He would be an example. I can't remember his name. The brother's name. And folks like Jabari Parker, who played.
Wow, that's right.
At Duke for a minute. And so folks like him, you see second generations now who are popping up. So I think BYU is growing their own athletes from the growth of the church and the growth of what small population of black people they have. And you see a lot of mixed marriages there. So a lot of biracial kids now that are coming up.
That's the state of America, right? State of race in America.
Yeah.
Doc, let me tell you something. We appreciate you stopping by Funky Politics. We got to get you back, man. We're going to run you through every show. We're going to have you on 3 Black Chicks. We're going to have you everywhere. Man, you're deep, Doc. You're deep.
I don't know about that.
No, we appreciate you coming by Funky Politics. DC, Doc Ward, and Lisa Moore. What? I like the way you said what. Thank you a lot, Doc, for coming by to see us, okay? Right here on Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network.
We got the funk. Funky Politics on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN.
Riffin' on Jazz.
I'm Howard Robertson, one of your hosts for Riffin' on Jazz. Riffin' is your weekly visit with friends where we dive all in to that classic African-American art form called jazz every week on your favorite broadcast and podcast platforms.
Riffin' on Jazz on the KUDZUKIAN Network.
KUDZUKIAN.
You're listening to Funky Politics, powered by the KUDZUKIAN Network with me, Doc. DC, and our extra special guest, another phenomenal woman, Miss Lisa Moore.
Hello.
Did you enjoy yourself today?
So great. What a great conversation.
Did you have a good time?
Had a good time.
Let me ask you something. When you listen and but when you hear the term melt, what does that mean to you, melt? To melt. When something melts, what does it do?
M-E-L-T?
Yeah,
Change
melt.
form?
Yeah. It melts. Something melts. It sort of dissolves.
Sure, that's right.
Into the thing that is either holding it or into the background of the thing that it is in the foreground of, right?
True.
So like ice cream melts.
That's deep.
Into the puddle of,
sure, gold
on the cone, and gold melts and everything else. And United States is called a melting pot, right?
Oh, I see where you're going, Doc.
Yes.
We're a melting pot, right?
Yes.
So if we're melting and we're constantly liquefying or at least transforming into the greater thing, then why is there so much resistance right now in our country for people to accept that melting process? We're at a point right now. We talked about Chicago at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
Chicago has elected its first openly gay, second woman, third African American, first non-Chicagoan in some almost 100
Wait a minute.
years.
Third? There was a third African American? No.
There was Harold
first.
Washington. There was Harold Washington. And
There's
then
never
there
been
was a gentleman took over for Harold Washington after he died. He died in office. And now
But there was never an African American woman, though.
No, she's only the second woman. Jane Byrne was the first.
Sure. Oh, I know about Jane.
But to the point, though, you have someone that represents so much of so many of what we are about in America. Whether it's one piece or several pieces of who she is and her cultural or gender or whatever identity. But there's still resistance in America to women leadership, gay leadership, African American leadership. So when are we so hard? Is the ice so thick that we can't find ourselves melting?
I think the melting pot is a myth. So you yourself said it. A melting pot starts in one form. But then as it melts, it becomes something different.
It becomes the greater
thing.
So
if the greater thing, and I believe those that look like what the melting pot was before it started to melt are pretty clear when it melts, I'm not the main thing.
Well, isn't that
and
what we're
that's
supposed to be?
called fear. So we have a lot of fear-based leadership because to melt and become something else means that what I am will have to change.
Wow. What say you, DC?
I have to give it up.
Yeah. I agree with you, too. But you know what? When something refuses to melt, you know what we have to do?
What?
Turn up the heat.
And that's what we're going to do right here on Funky Politics every time we get a guest like Darron Smith or anyone else. We keep the heat turned up. It's hotter than Bikram yoga, y'all, right up in here on Funky Politics.
It gets so funky, but it ain't right.
That's right.
Right. But it's so right. It's
because
so
if
good.
it ain't hot, it ain't funky. So until next time, we invite you to join us again. But remember, whatever you do in life, as you continue to melt into this greater thing, you have to keep it real.
Got to keep it right.
And you have to keep it funky.
Funky.
We'll help you right here on Funky Politics.
Funky Politics, hosted by Darrell DC Catron, Tosha Downey, and Marcus M.D. Ward. Recorded at KUDZUKIAN Studios. Directed, produced, and distributed by KUDZUKIAN.